The driver had already merged into traffic when Junho remembered the merger documents locked in his glass-top desk. $400 million needed his signature before sunrise. He said nothing. He simply told the driver to turn around. Nobody expected him back. The estate gates parted without a sound, bowing to the weight of who he was. Solar lights traced the familiar path through the garden, soft and golden and deceiving. He stepped onto the stone walkway, his mind already rehearsing the clauses, and then a hand clamped over his mouth with the force of a woman half her age. "Don't move." It was Celeste. The old groundskeeper dragged him sideways into the shadow of a dense oleander wall, her grip like braided rope, her hands smelling of mulch and lavender oil. "Don't even breathe," she said, her mouth close to his ear. "Just hear me." Through the half-open window of the sitting room, a voice drifted out into the cool night. It was Yuna. She sounded like she was ordering takeout, calm, bored, already somewhere else. "Yes," Yuna said into the phone. "I increased the dosage." There was a pause. Junho felt the cold press of the air against his teeth. "No, not enough to take him tonight," she continued. "That raises flags. His physician has already noted the cardiac irregularities. By the end of the month, they'll write it up as a failure of the heart. Nobody questions a workaholic." Junho's eyes went still. He stared at the oleander blooms and felt his body turn to something that was no longer flesh. Inside, the sound of ice against crystal. Yuna laughed. It wasn't the laugh of a monster. It was the laugh of a woman already redecorating. "I swapped his morning supplement 8 weeks ago. Steady, microscopic doses. By the time he starts to understand what's happening to him, he won't be able to form the words to say it." Celeste slowly peeled her hand from Junho's face. He didn't reach for the pistol at his hip. He didn't move at all. He just watched through the window as a man stepped into the light beside his wife. Not a rival, not a stranger. Someone Junho had once trusted with wire transfers, with silence, with his life. The man slid his hands around Yuna's waist, his mouth grazing her neck. "How much longer?" he asked. Yuna's voice dropped low, the way it used to when she spoke only to Junho. 3 weeks, she said. Junho's jaw shifted. He had survived the underground markets of Busan. He had clawed his way from nothing to a skyline. But he had never stood in his own garden listening to his death being arranged like a dinner reservation. Behind him, Celeste exhaled a rough, jagged truth into the dark. "They've been doing this for months, Junho." Inside the room, Yuna lifted her glass to the empty air. "To everything that's coming," she said. In the dark of that garden, the man they called the Ghost of Soul finally understood. He wasn't just being betrayed. He was being dissolved. One man's sanctuary had become his slaughterhouse. If you want to see how the ghost rises, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And tell us in the comments the city or country you're watching from. Junho did not draw the pistol from his waistband. He didn't crack open the sitting room door and rewrite the night in violence. Instead, he stood in the cold breath of the garden and looked at Celeste Aucaffer. His eyes were the color of something burnt. "Not a word," he said. The command was barely above a whisper, but it landed the way a judge's gavel lands. Celeste didn't flinch. She was 63 years old and had outlasted 4 seasons of storms that would have ripped up younger women by the roots. "I've been watching her for 10 weeks, she said, her voice measured and low. "She stopped making your morning drink in the main kitchen 2 months ago. She takes the bottles to her vanity room now. I found the empty vials in the bin behind the greenhouse. She told the housekeepers they were probiotic capsules." She paused. "I was raised in Accra. My grandmother grew foxglove along the fence. I know what oleander extract smells like when it's been refined. I know what it does to a man's heart over time." Junho looked at his hands. They were still for now, but he thought of the board presentation last Tuesday, the way his pen had slipped, the way the numbers on the projector had blurred at the edges. The fog he had been blamming on exhaustion. The fatigue he had been swallowing with black coffee. He wasn't deteriorating from overwork. He was deteriorating by design. "You've been protecting me," Junho said. The weight of that truth felt heavier than the betrayal sitting beside it. "I was protecting the house," Celeste said, her loyalty stripped of any warmth it didn't need. "If you collapse, this whole estate becomes something ugly very fast. You need to look exactly like what they think you are. Confused, fatting, blind. That's the only way we find out who else is in the room." Junho nodded once. a covenant sealed in silence between a king and the woman who kept his earth clean. He turned and moved back toward the service road, away from the house, disappearing before Yuna could register that he had ever returned. He had survived the streets of Seoul by knowing exactly when not to strike. Now he would survive Manhattan by learning how to perform his own death. The following afternoon, a weathered Jeep rattled up the delivery lane, parking far from the black SUVs that lined the main drive. Adiz Akhafer stepped out. She had none of her mother's stillness. She moved the way a person moves when they've spent their whole life having to be twice as sharp just to be taken seriously. Her eyes swept the property with the precision of someone looking for an exit and an entrance at the same time. Adiz had come back only to help Celeste move heavy planters to the winter greenhouse. She made no secret of her feelings about the man who signed the paychecks. To her, Junho was another powerful man who confused owning things with understanding them. Junho watched her from the second-floor landing. The edges of his vision were already going soft. He needed blood work, but every private clinic in the city had a paper trail, and his brother had people who read paper trails for breakfast. He waited until Celeste disappeared into the potting shed and met Adiz near the old stable wall. She didn't startle when he stepped out of the shadow. She just gripped the handle of a pruning knife a little tighter. "You look about 10 years older than your press photos, Mr. Kang," she said flatly. "I need a blood panel," he said. "No names, no records, nothing that touches a server." Adiz laughed once, short and dry as sand. "Why would I do anything for you? My mother has poured 15 years into this garden. You don't even know what she grows." She looked him over the way a doctor looks at someone before telling them bad news. "Go to a clinic." "I can't," Junho said, and the effort of keeping his voice steady cost him something visible. "If I walk through any registered door, the people trying to finish me will know I've started looking. Your mother is the reason I'm still upright, Adiz. She's the one who told me to come to you." Adiz went quiet at the mention of her mother. She looked at the slight tremor in his left hand, then at the hollow beneath his eyes. She saw it then, not the CEO, the man inside the CEO who was scared and had almost no one left. "I have a friend," she said finally, her voice dropping. "Lab tech, she owes me one. But understand something, this doesn't make us allies. I'm doing this for her, not for you." She didn't wait for gratitude. She pulled a small kit from her bag and drew the sample right there against the old stable wall. As the needle went in, Junho understood that this daughter was a different kind of dangerous than her mother. Celeste's loyalty was rooted in duty. Adiz was rooted in truth. And in a house built entirely on lies, truth was the only currency left. 3 hours later, his phone screen lit up. Restricted number. He let it go to nothing and opened the encrypted app Adiz had made him download before she drove away. The message contained a PDF, a grid of chemical markers and bolded warnings. He didn't need a degree to read the summary line. Chronic olendrin toxicity, progressive cardiac and hepatic failure, consistent with prolonged low-dose oral exposure. Cold, methodical, a slow disappearance disguised as nature taking its course. Junho sat on the edge of the bed, the city glittering indifferently through the window behind him. He looked at the hall door. Yuna was somewhere on the other side of it, probably already planning the sympathy outfits. The old heat moved through him, the urge to end it all in one clean motion. He pressed it down. A quick ending was a mercy she hadn't earned. He called Adiz. "The results confirmed it," he said. "The supplement, it's the delivery." "What do we do now?" Her voice had shed its edge. What was left was sharp in a different way. "Police. The police can be bought," Junho said. "My brother has been buying people for 20 years, and Yuna can perform grief so convincingly she once made a judge cry at a charity dinner. If I show my hand too early, they'll just accelerate the timeline somewhere I have no ground to stand on." He listened to the quiet of the house breathing around him. "Keep the drive safe. Keep the results. If something happens to me before this is finished, you don't go to the authorities. You go to the board, to the press, to the streets. You make their names into something people spit." "You're going to keep drinking it?" Adiz asked, and for the first time there was something close to fear in her voice. "Celeste is still managing the doses in the fridge. I'll perform. I need them comfortable enough to get sloppy." He paused. A man who believes he's already won stops covering his tracks. The thread between them was thin, but it held. The transformation came slowly at first, then all at once. Junho built his masterpiece of collapse the way he had once built his empire, brick by invisible brick. He let the porcelain cup rattle against the saucer at breakfast. He let Yuna catch him gripping the banister on the staircase, his breath audible. In the boardroom, he became a fatting signal, trailing off mid-sentence, staring at the skyline while his brother delivered presentations with barely concealed hunger. The board exchanged weighted looks. His brother's eyes gleamed like a man counting what isn't his yet. The false finish line was coming into view for all the wrong people. Celeste watched from the garden, her hands steady in the soil, her heart anything but. One afternoon, as she pruned the hedges near his bench, she leaned close. "You're performing this too convincingly," she said under her breath. "The CFO was laughing with your brother in the study this morning. They're not waiting anymore. They're moving to liquidate while you're still breathing. Evil grows impatient when it smells blood." Junho kept his gaze on his shaking knee. Let them move. An impatient enemy stops looking where they're walking. They already think the crown is in their hands. They've forgotten there's still a man attached to it. Inside the house, Yuna had stopped pretending. She no longer stepped out of rooms to take calls. She left her phone face up on the counter. She stood over Junho on the sofa one evening, looking at him the way a person looks at furniture they're about to replace. "Rest, Junho," she said, her voice the consistency of warm oil. "You've fought so hard for so long. It's all right to let go now." He closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, he was counting. But the escalation came faster than Celeste had anticipated. One afternoon, while she worked with her back to the kitchen door, she heard the distinct sound of a vial being uncapped. She caught the reflection in the steel surface of the range hood. Yuna was at the refrigerator, not just pouring the supplement, but emptying a full concentrated vial directly into the glass. This wasn't the careful, patient schedule from before. This was an ending being moved up. Celeste turned around, her face emptied of all pretense. That's quite a large dose for a man who can barely lift his cup. Yuna didn't jump. She set the glass down and turned slowly, and the warmth that had always lived somewhere in her face, even when it was false, was simply gone. "You've always looked at me like I owe you something," Yuna said. "Like watching me from doorways was your right. You're the gardener, Celeste. You should have stayed in the ground." "I know what's in that glass," Celeste said, her voice barely trembling. "And so does he." "He doesn't know what season it is," Yuna said. "And you are finished here. Collect your things. If I see you pass the gate by evening, I'll have the guards carry you out." Two of Junho's own security men escorted Celeste to the gate, men who had quietly realigned their loyalty to his brother weeks ago. Junho watched from the upper window. He watched Celeste stand at the gate in the evening light, her small bag at her feet, her back straight anyway. The doses would no longer be diluted. The buffer was gone. That night, Yuna came to the bedroom with the glass. She sat beside him on the mattress, her fingers moving through his hair with a tenderness that had no heart behind it. "Drink this, Junho," she murmured. "You need your strength." He looked at her and found nothing familiar. He took the glass. His hands had stopped their performance shaking. He tipped it back, the bitterness coating his throat like a judgment. Celeste Ockhafer was not built to surrender. She had spent her life growing things in soil that didn't want to give. She was not going to stand at the edge of a road and watch a man she had shielded be swallowed whole. That night she moved through the blind spots in the security system she had memorized over 15 years. She came through the service entrance, moving carefully, her breathing controlled, carrying a clean, untampered bottle to make one final exchange. She was 2 steps from the cabinet when the kitchen light snapped on. The CFO stood in the doorway with his tie loose and a drink in his hand, looking at her the way men look at problems they've already decided to solve. "The gardener," he said. "Yuna called you a loose end. I told her loose ends have a way of knotting themselves." "You are poisoning a man who gave you everything," Celeste said, her voice steady in the way that only deep, certain people can manage when they're afraid. "You think the life you're buying with his death will feel like what you imagined." "It always does," he said and stepped toward her. Celeste swung the glass bottle in a wide, defiant arc. But he was younger, and he had been waiting for exactly this. He caught her wrists. The struggle lasted seconds. He drove her back with a hard, ugly shove. Her heel caught the marble edge of the kitchen island. The world tilted. There was a sound that the house absorbed without comment, a sound that meant everything was different now. He stood over her for a full minute. He did not call anyone. He picked up the bottle she had brought, wiped the counter, and walked out. He left the lights off. It would look like an old woman who had come back where she wasn't wanted and lost her footing in the dark. When the morning came through the kitchen windows, Junho found her. He stood over Celeste's body and did not move for a long time. His face was not grief. It was something past grief, something colder and more permanent. The conspiracy had consumed the one person who had stayed in the dark with him. The ghost was no longer performing. This time, he was going to burn the whole architecture down. Adiz did not arrive with tears. She arrived with her jaw set and her eyes burning with the specific fury of a woman who had lost the most important person in her world and had no one appropriate to blame standing in front of her. She pushed past the gate's security. When she found Junho near the oleander wall where her mother had once saved his life, she didn't see an empire. She saw a man who had let her mother walk into a kitchen to die for him. "She stayed in this house to save you," Adiz said, her voice fracturing at the edges. "She lied to her own daughter about how dangerous it had gotten. She died on your floor because you were too busy staging your collapse to just finish it." Junho didn't argue. He didn't point to the tremor still moving through him like a slow current. He stood in the shadow of the flowers and let her words land where they were meant to land. "They didn't just try to erase me, Adiz," he said finally. "They used her life to tidy up their plan. To them, she was an accounting error." He looked at her directly. "You have the drive. You have the blood work. But evidence in front of a jury they can buy doesn't give your mother anything. They'll walk out of a courtroom and toast to it." Adiz pressed her palm flat against her face, pushing the tears back behind something harder. "Then, what are we doing?" "We give them the win they killed for," Junho said. "We let them believe the ghost is gone. And when they drop their guard completely, when they are laughing in my chair and signing my name, I take back everything, all of it. And I make sure the fall is public enough that there's no buying their way out of it." It was no longer survival. It was not even justice in the clean, legal sense. It was a blood pact made in a garden where a woman who deserved better had spent the best years of her life making things grow. Adiz looked at him and chose. The city's annual leadership gala was the most photographed event of the calendar. This year, it was meant to be a quiet funeral for Junho Kang, attended by the man himself. He arrived with a cane, his complexion a calculated pallor achieved with cosmetic work and weeks of structured deprivation. Yuna was beside him in deep burgundy silk, her hand on his arm with the exact pressure of a woman preparing to receive condolences. To the room, he was a great man dimming. To his brother and the CFO, he was minutes from the finish line. Midway through the keynote, Junho gripped the podium. His breathing turned labored, then audible, then wet and wrong. He looked once at Yuna and then his body buckled. The thud of him hitting the stage floor silenced 500 people at once. Yuna covered her mouth with the back of her hand. It almost looked like horror. The paramedics, sourced entirely by Adiz's network, moved him out within minutes. Yuna did not ride in the ambulance. She flagged down a car instead. Back at the estate, the pretense evaporated completely. The CFO and Yuna stood in the study with crystal glasses and 15-year-old scotch that Junho had been saving for his 60th birthday. "To the closing of a chapter," the CFO said, his voice round with satisfaction. "The board convenes at 9. The shell company transfers are already staged. By noon, we hold majority." Yuna sank into Junho's leather chair and crossed her legs. He was so convinced I still loved him. He was performing strength for a woman who had already moved on. It's almost sad. They laughed the way people laugh when they have forgotten they are not alone. They did not notice the small camera concealed in the base of the bronze sculpture on the bookshelf. They did not know that Adiz was parked 3 streets away in a rental van, watching every second of it on a live feed, her jaw tight, her mother's name running through her head like a prayer she hadn't finished yet. In the private wing of the hospital, the machines maintained their convincing rhythm. The nurses on the floor knew only what the chart told them. But when the door clicked shut and Adiz slipped in, the man in the bed sat up like someone waking from a choice rather than asleep. He pulled the monitoring sensors from his chest. His hands were steady. The cosmetic pallor was gone. What replaced it was not health exactly. It was focus, sharp and total and aimed. "You're really okay," Adiz said. It came out quieter than she intended. Adi's contact has been providing the counter agents for 3 weeks, he said, standing. The collapse was choreographed down to the sound. I needed them past the point of caution. He moved to the laptop she had brought. On the screen, the study footage played back at full clarity. Yuna's voice, the CFO's voice, the laughter, and the offhand joke about how Celeste must have slipped. Junho watched it and went completely, terrifyingly still. They think tomorrow is their coronation, he said. They're walking into a boardroom to divide what I built. He looked at Adiz, and for the first time since this began. He looked at her without the distance of employer and employee between them. Your mother died in that kitchen so that I would still be standing in this room. I intend to be worth that. Adiz nodded once. Whatever she felt about him, whatever complicated, grief-weighted thing that was, she filed it somewhere she could deal with later. Right now, there was work. The 58th floor boardroom was glass and gray light. The city spread below it like something waiting to be told what it was. Yuna sat at the head of the table in white, the color of a beginning. The CFO had his briefcase open, the transfer documents visible at the top. The atmosphere in that room was the quiet, expensive kind that happens when people believe they have already won. In light of the difficult circumstances surrounding my husband's condition, Yuna began, her tone calibrated to the frequency of a woman holding herself together with grace. We are here to protect the continuity of this institution. The majority holdings have been consolidated. All that remains is the board's formal. The doors at the far end of the room did not open. They were thrown back with a force that sent a crack through the ambient confidence of everyone inside. Junho Kang walked in. No cane, no tremor. He moved the way he moved when he first built the company, like a man who understood that rooms shift when he enters them. His suit was black. His eyes were on Yuna and they did not leave her. Behind him, Adiz Akafar walked with her chin level and a tablet under her arm. Yuna's face did something complicated and then went white. The CFO's pen hit the table, and the sound bounced off every glass surface in the room. You were admitted, the CFO managed. I was, Junho said, his voice filling the space without effort. But I decided I shouldn't miss the reading of my own will. He nodded once toward the screen at the head of the room. The corporate logo disappeared. What replaced it was audio, then a visual feed, clear and time-stamped and undeniable. Yuna's voice from the study, detailing dosages, timelines, the careful substitution of supplements. The CFO discussing the transfers. Both of them laughing about an old woman who had, in their telling, simply tripped. The board members pushed back from the table as if the two had become contagious. Security did not step toward the exits to block Junho. They stood at the doors and looked only at him. Junho walked to the head of the table slowly. He stopped in front of Yuna, close enough that she had to look up at him, and he said nothing for 3 full seconds. You didn't marry a man in decline, he said. You married a man who survived soul with nothing but his own willingness to outlast. You should have studied your target more carefully. Yuna's legs gave her nothing. She collapsed back into the chair she had claimed, the white of her suit suddenly looking like a mistake. The CFO was already in handcuffs by the time he realized the officers had been in the building since dawn. His face, as they led him out, was the face of a man discovering that confidence is not the same as safety. Junho watched them go. He did not feel the rush he had expected. He felt the particular silence of a man who has won back something that now looks different than it did when he lost it. The estate was quiet in the way that places are quiet after they've expelled something. The legal proceedings had begun their long, slow work. The house breathed normally again, though the rooms still held the shape of what had happened in them. Junho walked the grounds in the late afternoon and stopped at the edge of the terrace where Celeste had once pressed her hand hard against his mouth and saved his life without asking for anything in return. The oleanders were in bloom. Their beauty did not feel like a threat anymore. It just felt like something alive that had outlasted the people who tried to use it. Adiz was kneeling in the bed near the south wall. She was wearing her mother's work vest. Her hands were in the soil. She didn't look up when she heard him approach because she didn't need to. I've instructed the lawyers to establish a foundation, Junho said. The Celeste Akafar Fund. It will provide capital to the small business owners and families that were displaced during my expansion years. It won't make the accounts balance, but I'm done pretending that growing was the same as being right. Adiz sat back on her heels and looked at her hands. Then she looked up at him. You think money is an apology? No, Junho said. I think it's a first step that doesn't ask for forgiveness yet. That's different. He sat on the stone bench in the evening light, the same bench from which he had performed his dying. He looked at Adiz, who had seen him at the bottom of everything and had not softened toward him simply because of it. He respected that more than he knew how to say. I built all of this under the idea that power meant being unreachable, he said quietly. But the only person who actually stayed when it mattered, who risked everything for a man she didn't even like on his good days, was your mother. He paused. That's not power. That's something I don't have a word for yet. Adiz rose from the soil and stood beside him. Not behind. Not below. She stood the way two people stand when they've been through something that rewrites the relationship from the beginning. She saw something in you, Adiz said. She always saw past the surface of things. It's what made her good at what she did. She looked out over the garden, her mother's garden, still growing. Don't let her have been wrong about you. Junho looked at the house, then at the soil, then at the woman beside him. The ghost of soul had no more performances left in him. He was just a man standing in a garden in the early dark, beginning, with considerable difficulty, to become someone worth the cost of keeping alive. When a king is stripped down to nothing, you discover who he actually is. If this story reached you, hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. We want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below.